take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, August 19th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show, which is continuing to evolve minute by minute, day by day. I've been on the phone all day with media sharks looking to gobble me up. I guess I shouldn't put it that way. It's looking to be, more distribution, more marketing, getting a sales team, a marketing team, having tech people back me up. I mean, can you imagine it? I might be able to just make this show and not have to do everything else. So I'm getting pretty excited about that. I'm also excited about our guest tomorrow. I've been perusing his books. Drugs Are Not the Devil's Tools. Dr. David Bierman, MD, will join us tomorrow. Just today, I was thumbing through volume 1 of 2. That's a 2-volume set. Volume 1 runs from 2637 BC to 1969 AD. And then volume 2 is 1970 through 2015. And I got to tell you, folks, this set of books is the new The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Everybody's got a copy of the Jack Herer, The Emperor Wears No Clothes book. These two books are next. You need to add these to your library because the entire history of not just marijuana prohibition, but drug prohibition in general is covered in these books. I can't wait to talk to Dr. Bierman about that on tomorrow's show. But on today's show, it's Wednesday. That means it's hump day, and that means it's hemp day. We've got organic cowboy himself, Doug Fine, joining us for our hump day update. You know him as the best-selling author of Hemp Bound and Too High to Fail. He'll give us the latest updates on industrial hemp. Also, we'll take your questions from the chat room and on our live phone line, toll free at 84-420 radio. So if you want to chime in and ask some questions of one of the world's leading hemp experts, this will be your chance to do it. Also on the show today, in Behind the Headlines, more from Seattle Hemp Fest. We've got one final speech to deliver for you from Brandon Krenzler, aka Canadad. He's the dad of Brave Michaela. You remember Brave Michaela, our good friend, the young girl who beat leukemia by using cannabis oil. We'll hear his story and his new group, Parents for Pot, in the Behind the Headlines segment right after the news. Then in our activist agenda, we're going to take a look at the continent of Africa and specifically the country of South Africa, where they've been fighting for a full-scale marijuana legalization bill that looks like it's now going to get watered down to being medical marijuana only. We'll tell you how that happened. Also, on the show today, we'll have time for a radical rant. If you want marijuana unity, stop voting for my criminality. We're going to take a look at how the recent campaigns for marijuana legalization have created division in the marijuana community and maybe try to figure out whose fault that really is. Then stay tuned for Hour 2 Toker Talk Radio live on 420radio.org. We will have more for you, including a look at Seattle Hemp Fest music sensation Gebular, which appeared on the McWilliams stage. Great rock band, good short song from them coming up. And we've got a panel on terpenes. Everything you could ever want to know about the terpenes in a cannabis plant. Man, I didn't know some of this stuff. It was fascinating to learn. Stay tuned for that. That's coming up in Hour 2, as well as another mini rant on how recreational use is a misnomer, and we need to stop saying it. All that coming up on the Russ Belville Show.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
This is Lori Duckworth, and I'm here with the Hempery, Greta Gaines Company, and you're listening to 420 Radio.
420 Radio is brought to you by Sacred Serum, who is focused on creating elegant and sophisticated cannabis solutions through its line of dispensers and vaporizers that come preloaded with the world's finest cannabis concentrate. Sacred Serum's concentrate is made on pharmaceutical-grade supercritical CO2 extraction machines that use absolutely no butane or other toxic chemicals. The Vesica, the company's innovative new way to dab and frost, is now available in dispensaries across California. Sacred Serum, elegance and sophistication concentrated.
Step into the future every Tuesday night with Electric Bob's Boogaloo, our weekly electronic music jam. Electric Bob brings you the latest house, trance, dubstep, and other electronic music from the freshest DJs and producers. It's every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, with replays weekends at 11 p.m. on 420radio.org.
Hi, I'm Alex Rogers, producer of the 4th Oregon Medical Marijuana Business Conference, the OMMBC. There have been a lot of recent changes to Oregon cannabis laws. Recreational sales start October 1st, new licensing from the state, and changes to medical marijuana. Are you prepared? Join us at the downtown Portland Hilton September 12th and 13th with the industry's top cannabis experts, political leaders, exhibitors, and nightly networking events. For more information, join us online or give us a call. The OMMBC. Be part of history.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Replays of 420 Radio News are embeddable and shareable from our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/RadicalRuss. Now, the marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, August 19th, 2015. It's been a year and a half since the legalization of marijuana went into effect in Colorado. Business for purveyors of marijuana was good from the beginning, but has soared in the past year, according to data collected by the Colorado Department of Revenue. The state collected $9.7 million in taxes related to marijuana sales in June 2015, up nearly $5 million from the same month last year. By May, the state has collected more than $88 million in marijuana taxes in 2015. The numbers are staggering. According to the state, marijuana tax revenues jumped from $25 million in the first 5 months of 2014 to $44 million in the first 5 months of this year. According to the Department of Revenue, $23 million in tax revenues will go to fund public schools this year. Revenues from June 2015 alone hit $3 million for the schools. Responsible Ohio, the group behind the pro-marijuana issue, announced it will take the wording of the proposal to the Ohio Supreme Court. On Tuesday afternoon, the Ohio Ballot Board approved wording that voters will see this fall while deciding the fate of marijuana legalization, redistricting changes, and restrictions aimed at keeping monopolies or cartels from being added to the state constitution. Quote, "The ballot language assigned to the Marijuana Legalization Amendment, Issue 3, is clearly biased and gives preference to the arguments of marijuana reform opponents. The language is inaccurate and strategically worded as to misguide voters," end quote, said Responsible Ohio legal counsel, former Ohio Supreme Court Justice Andy Douglas. Don McTeague, an attorney for Responsible Ohio, argued that the word recreational was not in the proposed amendment, while the phrase personal use was. He suggested recreational was chosen based on unfavorable polling. Quote, "We don't say recreational smoking of cigarettes," end quote, McTeague told the board. The chief of Connecticut's medical marijuana program said Wednesday he will draft regulations to allow the drug to be used by those who suffer from complex regional pain syndrome, immediately following a unanimous recommendation by a physician review board. Consumer Protection Commissioner Jonathan A. Harris added the medical condition, marked by severe pain, swelling, and hypersensitivity to touch following an injury or surgery. In a 4-0 vote Wednesday, the state's Medical Marijuana Program Board of Physicians recommended the syndrome be added to the list of conditions, noting that it was in the same vein as other neuropathic pain already covered by the state's medical marijuana laws. The pain syndrome now joins 6 others that are pending final approval: ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, ulcerative colitis, Fabry disease, sickle cell disease, severe psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, and post-laminectomy syndrome with chronic radiculopathy, which is a recurring back pain after surgery. In the 10 months since Florida began preparing physicians to qualify patients for medical marijuana, only 42 have signed up to do so. Yet medical marijuana advocates say they are unconcerned because the rest of the state's limited medical marijuana program has developed well behind schedule. So doctors have at least another 6 months to earn state approval before the medicines arrive. Under that 2014 law, Florida patients with certain ailments can qualify to use drugs derived from non-euphoric strains of marijuana. Patients with cancer, epilepsy, and other ailments that cause uncomfortable tremors or seizures, such as Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis, can qualify. First, though, patients must have state-approved doctors examine them and recommend those drugs. No one knows how many qualified and willing patients might emerge. Estimates have ranged from hundreds to tens of thousands. There are an estimated 400,000 Floridians with epilepsy, according to the Epilepsy Foundation of Florida. 420 Games is a Marin County, California-based events company whose goal is to destigmatize the mainstream opinion that cannabis users are lazy stoners. The company holds 4.2-mile runs and walks and other types of sporting events to show that marijuana users are just as active as non-users. 420 Games held its second annual 4.2-mile run in San Francisco on Saturday and has also hosted a run in San Jose, California. The company plans to introduce its events in new cities with a run, then expand to other activities such as golf tournaments, paddleboard races, and longboard marathons, he says. The events are family-friendly, he says, and people do not have to use marijuana to participate in the activities. The most recent race had about 500 participants. This has been your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, August 19th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville.
This is the Russ Belville Show.
Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland NORML, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland NORML at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the fourth Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland NORML, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers. At midnight, July 1st, 2015, adult marijuana prohibition came to an end in Oregon. Immediately, over 400,000 adults who consume cannabis responsibly were no longer criminals. This is what freedom sounds like. Brought to you by Portland NORML. The fingerboard extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The fingerboard extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com. Today in Behind the Headlines, I want to talk a little bit about a friend of the show named Brandon Krenzler. I first met Brandon along with his wife, Erin Purchase. She's the mom of Brave Michaela, the little girl here in Oregon who at the time, I guess she was 9, 8. Maybe she was younger than that. Maybe she was even 7. She was young, a little kid, and she was suffering from leukemia. And she had lost her hair and was doing all the typical treatments when they switched over to using, I don't know if they did the typical treatments, but they used cannabis oil to help her with her treatments. And she gained a lot of exposure, ended up on TV shows, as well as getting a lot of radio and media or online news coverage. And little Michaela was such a great spokesperson for pediatric medical marijuana. She's a bright, happy little girl, and she understood, what was happening and why it was, as best a little kid can understand, why it was controversial for her to be using cannabis. But I think the best thing that has come out of this, aside from Michaela now having her leukemia in remission, is that her mom and dad, Aaron and Brandon, have become stellar activists in marijuana legalization and medical marijuana, talking at various events. And Brandon has co-formed Parents for Pot. He's speaking now at the Seattle Hemp Fest McWilliams stage.
Hello, HempFest. Thank you for having me here. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad it's a much nicer day today. Yesterday was a bit rainy. I'm an executive director at Parents for Pot. That's a national organization that's here to support our families who are our consumers of cannabis, who are activists, who are those who are facing a fight against the state or local entities who may be trying to take their children from them just for supporting our plant. This organization was brought forth by myself, along with a few other of my close friends and activists in the industry, after we realized that the moms for marijuana and the dads for marijuana needed to come together, because that's what a family is a single entity. We all need to stand together. You don't have to be a parent. You can join up. You can be one of us. You can just support the plant. It's fine with us. We came together, all of us, to have the chance to give a support network to those who haven't had it, because when you have a child and you use cannabis, you're always at risk of intervention from children's services. They can take your children and give them to somebody else, and that's wrong, because we're not doing meth, we're not doing cocaine, we're smoking weed. It's a harmless plant. And research is showing that this plant is really okay, and it's really good for children as well. And some of us, including our family, have chosen to treat our children with cannabis oil for diseases. My daughter's brave Michaela. She's now 10 years old. When she was 7 years old, she was diagnosed with leukemia, T-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. We were told to give her chemotherapy, steroids, and even offered radiation therapy. Chemotherapy didn't work for her. Steroid therapy didn't really work for her. Every time her cell count would go down, it would come back up. One day, watching her be too sick, knowing what we know about cannabis in our family, we chose to give her cannabis oil. Within 6 days, her oncologist told us they were baffled, but she was finally in remission. That right there was a miracle to us, and we decided that we would come out and tell everybody about it, hoping that we could empower the people to possibly make the same decision if they were ever faced with the same path. That is also a part of Parents for Pot. We represent the families who choose to step out from behind the closed doors and talk openly about treating their children with cannabis oil and other cannabis products. It works, but we face a very difficult path when we choose it. And so we need the support of other people who do the same thing as we do. We need the support of all of you. We need to talk about this. We need to demand research on this plant. They research pharmaceutical drugs every single day, trying to find new uses for them. They prescribe antidepressants for everything under the sun. They just lowered the maximum allowable age for the use of OxyContin to 11 years old. At the same time, they tell us we're criminal for choosing cannabis oil as another option. I don't see what the big deal is. If you're willing to give your kids some pills that get them really high in a bad way, why can't we choose to give our children oil that gets them high in a good way and makes them better? So basically, we all need to stand together in our states, whether we're legal or not, and realize that there are still 40 plus other states who don't have the same rights, the same access, and the same things that we do in Washington, Oregon, Alaska, DC, Colorado. They don't have that. They still choose to use oils for their children. They still choose to treat themselves with cannabis, but they don't have the rights, and every single day they're prosecuted. That's where we all come in. We all need to stand behind them. We need to support the fight. The fight for legalization and acceptance is far from over. So stand, come together, and support our organizations like Parents for Pot, Normal Women's Alliance, all these organizations. We're here for you. Thank you. Thank you, Brendan.
Hey, everybody, we're all going to get late.
It's 20 after 4:20 in Denver, Colorado. Time for us to take a union-mandated safety break. When we come back, we're going to talk about South Africa. Yeah, they're trying to legalize marijuana all over the world. And we bring you the international news right here on the Russ Belville Show. Stay tuned.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
Get.buzz. .buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. You're listening to 420 Radio. Listen Saturdays at noon Pacific for Medical Marijuana Radio, podcasting at medicalmarijuanaradio.com. Larry Love is reporting on the latest national news and studies concerning medical use of cannabis, with interviews of experts and policy analysis. Check our online listings for Medical Marijuana Radio with Larry Love from medicalmarijuanaradio.com. This is Radical Russ, encouraging you to take a look at the Weed Blog every day. Johnny Green and the staff at the Weed Blog are on top of all the latest developments in the fight to end marijuana prohibition nationwide. You can even get the Weed Blog on your smartphone by installing the Weed Blog app for iPhone and Android. If it's about weed, it's on the Weed Blog, including my original writing. So don't delay, read the Weed Blog today.
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everybody. Today in the Activist Agenda, we go all the way across the Atlantic Ocean and down to the Southern Hemisphere to talk about South Africa, where last year a member of the South African Parliament proposed a medical innovation bill. That's what it's called down there. This is back in 2014. And the man's name is Mario Oriani Ambrosini. And the medical innovation bill is more than just a medical marijuana bill. The bill would legalize the commercial, industrial, and medical applications of dagga. That's the local term for cannabis in South Africa, D-A-G-G-A, dagga. Mr. Oriani Ambrosini died of cancer, but his bill lives on in the Parliament's Health Committee, where they're currently discussing it, and members of the Inkatha Freedom Party are asking that the commercial and industrial regulations be deleted so that the bill focuses only on medical marijuana. Now, this party, the Inkatha Freedom Party, or IFP, is a minor party. It's only collected 2.4% of the vote in the last election, and it only holds 10 seats out of the 400-seat parliament that's currently led by the African National Congress, which has 249 seats. Now, the next leading party in the parliament in South Africa is the Democratic Alliance. They have 89 seats, and they've also called for a medical-only bill. Now, the Democratic Alliance, being the minority party there, the opposition party, has a shadow government, like a shadow cabinet, where they have their own health minister who will opine on health matters to counter what the African National Congresses or parliaments, leading parties' health minister might say. So the shadow cabinet health minister, Wilmot James, has called this medical innovation bill too overreaching. Now, the strange thing is that Oriani Ambrosini, the guy who wrote the bill and died of cancer, was a good close friend of Wilmot James, this shadow health minister. And Oriani Ambrosini told everyone he knew that he lived much longer than he was predicted to live with cancer, thanks to cannabis treatments that he received when he went overseas, presumably to America, to enjoy cannabis treatments. And of course, he told this to his close friend, Wilmot James, but Wilmot James told the members of Parliament to, quote, leave emotion aside and consider the bill rationally, end quote. That was quoted by the South Africa Business Daily. And this is something we hear a lot when medical marijuana bills come up is, don't let your emotions drive the debate here. Don't get all caught up in the children with the epileptic seizures and the cancer patients with the bald heads and all that. Just let's be sensible, right? Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because politics is about emotional things. But nonetheless, I tried looking up what the position of the African National Congress is on this, and I didn't find much in my short research, although I'm still looking for an official position on the medical innovation bill from the African National Congress. Now, the next leading party, that Democratic Alliance, looks like they are wanting to restrict this to medical only. The Inkatha Freedom Party wants to restrict it to medical only. And Dr. David Bayever, who's the deputy chairperson for the South African Central Drug Authority, their version of an FDA, testified to the health committee that dacha use is unhealthy and leads to respiratory, cardiovascular, mental, and cognitive disorders. So obviously, Dr. Bayever isn't listening to the Russ Belville show, and especially our Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch, as everything he mentioned has been debunked numerous times in numerous studies by numerous researchers. Despite that, he concluded that more research on cannabis was necessary before moving forward. We just don't have enough research. 7,000 years of recorded human history using cannabis, millions upon millions of people who have used it throughout time, is just not enough evidence. We need more research. Speaking of research, the South African Medical Research Council also weighed in on the bill, and they said, quote, the issue of medical cannabis should be separated from the legalization of cannabis, end quote. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next hour. Now, the bill itself is very short. Unlike American medical marijuana laws that have a big list of conditions, except California, it allows for the use of dacha for treatments of, quote, a medical condition which, if not cured, may cause the patient's death or severe impairment to his or her medical condition or quality of life, end quote. So a lot of latitude for doctors to make decisions there. The medical aspect of the bill calls for the establishment of one or more health service providers to provide cannabis treatments, hospitals, basically, clinics. However, the bill goes beyond simply authorizing cannabis as a medical treatment. In fact, it calls for, quote, innovation in absence of evidence-based treatment, end quote, in a section that allows healthcare providers to embark on treatments for which, quote, there is no research or other evidence, or evidence is insufficient or uncertain, end quote. So this isn't just medical marijuana. This is freeing doctors up to try other experimental treatments for which there isn't yet enough evidence. And the bill also states that no one shall be liable or guilty of any offense for growing, processing, distributing, using, prescribing, advertising, or otherwise dealing with or promoting cannabinoids for the purposes of medical treatment, end quote. But the next clause adds, and commercial or industrial uses, and that's what they're trying to strip out of the bill. So, we shall follow up on this and see how this winds through the South African Parliament. I got some friends with Normal South Africa that I've been reaching out to, see if we can get them on the show one of these days to give us an update from their perspective with the boots on the ground there. When we come back, we're going to have our Hemp Day Hump Day update. Doug Fine will be on the line, author of Hemp Bound and Too High to Fail, giving us the latest fortnight's news on industrial hemp in the United States of America. We'll take your questions in our chat room and toll free at 84-420 Radio.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio, among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome. Marijuana legalization also ushers in the return of the American hemp industry. Get the latest news from the author of Hempbound and Too High to Fail, Doug Fine, in our Hemp Day Hump Day update. Well, time for us to dig into the industrial hemp once again, and our good friend Doug Fine is on the line ready to talk to us. How you doing, Doug?
Oh, couldn't complain, Russ. It's good in New Mexico. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, although it's a little warm for my taste up here in Portland. We've had 25 days with over 90-degree temps, and I think today is going to be 26. It's a record here in Portland, but don't worry, there's no such thing as climate change. So, Doug, how are things going in the world of hemp? What can you tell us? What's the latest developments?
Well, season-wise in the U.S., it's sort of mid-season, and from sea to shining sea, hemp plants are growing. If folks follow me on Twitter at Organic Cowboy, I send tweets out of these pictures people are sending me from all over the country of their hemp fields, which is a lot of fun. The flowers are starting in some parts of the country, so it's a really interesting thing to watch. One interesting thing to me politically, Russ, is I was speaking with a very prominent player in the Canadian hemp industry, very, very prominent, somebody that's been in it for a long time. And he was talking to me about progress in Canada, what kind of a season they're looking like they're having there. And then he mentioned that he thought that psychoactive cannabis legislation was moving really fast in both countries. If the Liberals win in Canada, their candidate fully endorses full legalization. And we talked a little bit about the state. Then he said, but in the States, from what I understand, the psychoactive cannabis farms, it's all indoors, right? And I thought that was a really interesting comment from somebody who was very prominent in one part of the hemp plant. And because really I sort of had to jump in and say, actually, there's a whole thing of outdoor cultivators and, check out the book I wrote before Hempbound, Too High to Fail, which really talks about how important sustainability is and when possible cultivating under God's sun. And this was all news to him that there even was this kind of industry, this kind of thing that I and others go around advocating all the time. So to me, it's kind of the education curve continues even for people within the industry.
Wow, that's remarkable that they wouldn't know that kind of stuff, but that's why we're here, is to keep getting the information out. So we've got people planting hemp all around the country. How many states right now have hemp in the ground? Do you know?
It's a good question. There's 24 states that are authorized that have some sort of cultivation, but they fall into generally two categories. One I'll roughly call the Kentucky model, the states that have figured out a way to do a deal so that there's smooth operation on seed import and federal permits so that people are completely legal on the federal and state level. Tennessee is an example of that. They had a kind of 11th hour agreement for their farmers that were able to, as a result, get hundreds of acres in the ground and become a major hemp player right from year one. They're having a great year one. Kudos to Tennessee. The second category are states that have legislation and some kind of movement and momentum, some kind of program, but for one reason or another, either don't have that Kentucky level cooperation that makes it smooth at this interim level for folks who are listening and aren't aware. We have this research provision that on the federal level that allows hemp in hemp states that have hemp cultivation, Section 7606 of the 2014 Farm Bill. Many states, including Kentucky, interpret that research to include sales and marketing. So it's a de facto full legalization in those states, but only certain of the states are really leaping on board. You have to have a state that's actively involved. Even if you are one of those 24 states that does have cultivation but doesn't have 100% state participation on board, even some of those states are able to get a lot of acreage in, and that's the case of with a state like Oregon this year. And then there's a third category of a state like Hawaii that has only very, very limited 1 or 2 plots at a university. All of this exponentially growing per year.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So any measurement of, we know there's a lot of states, but how big are the crops? Still small research size, or are we getting to the point where we're finally going to be able to do something with this hemp?
The sizes vary. I'm about to go out and do a second wave of research and journalism and covering this year's season, and so I'll have a better handle on acreage probably by our next Hump Day. But to give an example, well, 2 points I wanted to make on that, Russ. One is on a state like Oregon, where I've been watching fairly closely, it looks like Oregon's acreage is going to be significantly more than Kentucky's acreage was last year. Kentucky got a lot of press last year because their representatives for the state, their U.S. senators and others, really pursued and made sure that there was federal permits in place. And they only had 30-something acres planted last year. This year, up to 600 acres. And the brand of Kentucky is really boosted for that. But those are small acreage numbers. Oregon, in its first year, is going to have more than Kentucky had last year. So who knows last year if and when the state is able to get a more organized and direct system going next year, or maybe we'll have full legalization by next season, which would be really nice and not worry about all that stuff. But one other quick thing about research doesn't necessarily mean small plots. And that was part of the debate that was going on in Oregon this year. Kentucky does not limit the acreage that it grants for its permittees at all. There are some farms that are hundreds of acres long. Their agriculture secretary just tweeted the other day that he's visiting and discussing business plans on a 60-acre farm in Kentucky. So this notion that research means, you're just doing like a half-acre little sort of test plot in some way, that's actually not what research is. And I make that point. That's not necessarily what research is. There's many different kinds of research. Certainly, if you want to do a seed study, there are certain studies you might do that might allow or mandate small acreage. But for me, I started researching hemp because I'm interested in a domestic non-fossil fuel solution for energy. And if you want to know whether or not hemp produces a large amount of biomass, you need to produce a large amount of biomass. So to do research into energy could require hundreds or even thousands of acre farms.
All right. Well, we've got a question from our chat room, and this is interesting because I was just reading Dr. Bierman's new book, and he mentioned the whole quote about George Washington sowing the hemp plants rather too late, and the speculation as to whether it was hemp or he's trying to grow for psychoactive purposes. But this question is kind of related to that. Is a male hemp plant as valuable as a female hemp plant? Is there a difference just within the hemp plants themselves as to what you're wanting?
And it's an absolutely fantastic question. The answer is it can be. It depends on what you're growing it for. It's a really diverse crop. with many applications, as people know. This model that I like to talk about so much, I wrote about in First Legal Harvest and Hempbound, called tri-cropping, allows a farming community to benefit from vertical integration of all facets of the plant. On the one hand, seed, flour, oil, and then on the other hand, a fiber/herd, and then the third, energy for biomass or for energy storage. And there could be some overlap amongst those three-legged tri-cropping. But to give you one example, China is really the leader in fiber, and especially hemp fiber for textiles. And because they grow large acreage, and explicitly because they tend to harvest and process by hand, and they want it that way, they have rejected opportunities to import large-scale processing, partly for employment reasons. But because they do that, they actually do get a different long or vast fiber quality in between the males and the females, and they go to two different places for two different kinds of textiles. So there are applications, absolutely, for males and females on the hemp side, depending on what you're growing for. If you're growing for, like right now, there's a boom on the market for cannabinoids, especially CBD, coming from flowers. People saying, oh, that they're growing hemp for that. It's under 0.3% THC. That would be a different story. That would be people growing more similar to the way psychoactive cannabis farm is growing and aiming for females. So it's different needs for different applications.
All right. We're speaking with Doug Fine, the author of Too High to Fail and Hempbound. It's our Hemp Day Hump Day update. And remember, you can always email questions into me as well. I'm radicalruss@gmail.com. And our final question asks, we've talked before about people being afraid of cross-pollination, hemp versus cannabis. But one of our listeners wants to know, has that ever actually been documented? Has that ever actually happened in the real world?
I'm not sure if it's ever happened. It's certainly, as far as I know from the literature and from speaking to other farmers, happened only very few times. In other words, statistically negligible times. Mm-hmm. Of the many studies that I've read on the subject, only one, a Canadian study, makes reference to I don't remember if it was anecdotal. It wasn't really a part of the scientific study, but that the study mentioned that when there was a plant that was timed to flower at the same point, at the exact, with the hemp field growing, literally a psychoactive plant placed in the actual hemp farm, but there may have been that case. But when I speak to farmers about it, as I say, in Europe, I've seen myself on field tours different cultivars of hemp that are adjacent or very close to each other, and farmers, they're not concerned about it. If you use good agricultural techniques, for instance, of those espoused by the pioneering Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association, they have to worry about that kind of thing all the time. They've never had a failure or an incident like that amongst the crops that they deal with. It's really about good communication and good farming practices. But a lot of the pioneers that are moving into what today we're calling the hemp factor, I tend to think of it more of as one plant. I support all varieties of the plant passionately, especially when they're cultivated sustainably and outdoors. But the folks that are pioneers on the return of hemp in the States tend to also be, many of them, not all of them, certainly not in Kentucky and those kind of states, but here at least on the West Coast, west of the Mississippi, tend to also be psychoactive cannabis farmers or have a history of it. And when you speak to them without fail, what they say is, the only time they see cross-pollination on their own psychoactive plants is pollen blown from other psychoactive plants onto their garden, and it's something they have to watch for. It's something that happens semi-regularly. They notice a few flowers, a few plants pollinated, and they take action to make sure that it doesn't damage their wider crop. For patients, in the case of pre-full legalization, patients are waiting. They need those crops to be successful, and so that's a message that I'm spreading. First of all, I don't think that the cross-pollination issue is one that we're going to be talking about a lot in coming years. I mean, it's something, as I say, what we as people who support the return of cannabis to above-ground economy, society, and agronomy are going to show the world that we can make it. Everybody work together and play nice.
All right. Well, that's good news, Doug. Thank you so much. And that's all the time we got, unfortunately. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Russ.
All right. When we come back, we'll have time for a radical rant. If you want marijuana unity, stop voting for my criminality.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Hey, Joey, I got some stuff you just gotta try. What is it? Pot. You know, marijuana. Oh, well, I don't know. What, chicken?
Joey's in a jam. What should he do? Cake.
Get a pizza.
Excellent. Get a pizza. Get real.
Get out of there.
You got it. Let's see if Joey's that smart.
I'm not chicken. You're a turkey.
He's right. Drug dealers are dorks. Don't even talk to them. Cowabunga!
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show.
Hey, Miss Jill, TGA Genetics Week Nerd. Watch replay at 420radio.org.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant. If you want unity, stop voting for my criminality. I just finished up my 10th Seattle Hemp Fest. In addition to the rainout we experienced on Friday, there was a dark cloud of emotion hanging over the event in the wake of drastic amendments to the Washington medical marijuana laws. Before, the Evergreen State boasted hundreds of dispensaries, no record keeping, and 15 cannabis plants and 24 ounces of marijuana for every medical marijuana patient. Now, in the wake of Senate Bill 5052 and other laws, dispensaries are being shuttered, patients are being registered, and medical limits have been reduced to 6 cannabis plants and 3 ounces of marijuana. The dark cloud is a feeling among many in the medical marijuana community that legalization did this to them. Without the passage of I-502 in 2012, they believe, medical marijuana would have kept humming along in an unregulated Wild West fashion with no meddling from the legislature. And if you believe that, I have a space needle to sell you. From the stages of HempFest and the panels at Hemposium, there was a call for unity. I just wonder who this call is directed toward. In the beginning, there was unity. In the 1970s, there was just high times and normal, fighting for all marijuana consumers to be free from arrest and interference. Nobody cared why you were smoking pot. The patient, the Rasta, and the stoner were all equals. By 1978, 11 states had decriminalized the personal possession for all 3 of those consumers. Why they were toking did not matter. But after stalling out in the 1980s, the 1990s ushered in the first division of marijuana consumers. Wise political minds realized that fighting for the patient would tug on the heartstrings of the electorate. Sure, the public hated potheads, but the public had a greater dislike toward allowing cancer patients to suffer. Thus, the division of our ranks began for political expediency. The 1996 Compassionate Use Act in California didn't protect the stoner, unless he or she was willing to lie or exaggerate to a doctor. But the stoners never rose up to oppose it. In fact, they voted for it by likely the greatest rate of any demographic, as the stoners have voted for every medical marijuana law since, even as those laws got more restrictive and put the stoners further away from that protection. But when Prop 19 arose in 2010 in California, an initiative to finally protect the stoners, it was some patients, goaded on by some in the medical marijuana industry, who were rising up against it, lending their support to Dianne Feinstein and the cops who were working so hard to keep me and the rest of the stoners criminals. This division repeated with Initiative 502 in 2012 in Washington. The patients and their medical marijuana industry supporters even formed the only official opposition group to protecting the stoners, as the local cops were actually in favor of I-502. The No on I-502 campaign predicted prices would be $600 an ounce. They're $225. The feds would shut down all the shops. There are 115 that are open. People caught with non-store weed would be busted. It's never happened. 10,000 possession arrests would all become DUIDs. There were about 700 greater than 5 nanogram DUIDs last year. The next legal states would have Washington's per se DUID and no home grow. They don't. Passing a joint would earn you a felony. It's never happened. And the law would never be improved. But they just legalized concentrates. It is not the stoners who have created any disunion. We've been voting for every law that protects any stoner. We even acceded to the patients when they demanded that our legalization initiatives not affect their existing medical marijuana laws in any fashion. And indeed, there's not one word in I-502 that changes one iota of the medical marijuana law. In Oregon, we even got more explicit and wrote that the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act shall not be affected by our Measure 91. Now, both of those initiatives could have been written to meld recreational and medical production, processing, and retailing. Explicit protections for medical use, therefore, could have been included, and we could have all backed one unifying initiative. But the patients were adamant. Don't do anything to unify medical with recreational, because the feds might then come in and shut it all down. You know, like they were going to come in and shut down all the stores. In other words, the patients got their protection. Don't you stoners mess it up trying to get your protection. So we didn't provide any statutory language whatsoever about medical use at all. And now, when legislatures are able to gut the existing medical marijuana laws, mostly in response to what they perceive as abuse of the system, the patients want to point the finger not at the legislature, but at the stoners for achieving their own protection. If you're out there complaining about the divisions between medical and recreational use, don't look at the stoners, look in the mirror. This was part of the panel that was called Medical, Recreational, and Spiritual Use. Can they coexist? Keith Stroup was on it. Carrie Boyder from Americans for Safe Access was on it. And that's notable because they were the two who faced off against each other in the 2012 HempFest panel called the Great I-502 Debate. But the problem is the medical folks refuse to recognize that the recreational consumers have been supportive of all reforms in marijuana laws, even when those reforms didn't help us at all. This goes all the way back to the beginnings of Prohibition. When they were prohibiting marijuana, there were no patients, there were no believers, there were no stoners. They were just a certain class of people having their lives upended and their freedom surrendered. It didn't matter whether they were hippies, draft dodgers, jazz musicians, Mexican laborers, sick or healthy. It didn't matter. What mattered is that they were potheads and they belonged in a cage. Then Keith Stroup comes along, forms NORML in 1970, and in the early 70s, everybody fought to keep potheads out of a cage. NORML fought and passed laws in 11 states to decriminalize personal possession of marijuana, no matter why you were using it. But then in the mid-1970s, we can start to see the divisions forming in the cannabis community. Robert Randall sued the federal government in 1976, claiming he had no choice but to smoke pot or go blind from glaucoma. And he won, and that medical necessity was recognized, and thus began the medical marijuana movement in America. For the first time ever, certain potheads were exempted from the cage based on belonging to a certain class. And as the 70s ran down, the next division among potheads came about. Brother Love, a sincere devotee to a faith that uses cannabis as a sacrament, made headlines calling for First Amendment recognition of his freedom of religion. Forbidding people of his faith from using ganja, he argued, was as unconstitutional as banning Catholics from communion wine. Now, despite the facts that medical use and religious use only counted for a small sliver of the potheads that were being caged for marijuana, NORML and other people fighting for legalization for all supported all these battles, realizing that any step forward in recognizing cannabis rights was a positive step. And then the 80s happened. Now, I still hear from people that will point to Keith Straup's outing of President Carter's drug advisor as a cocaine user as the downfall of 20th century legalization. And looking from the top down, from the top of government down, that might be true. But from the bottom of society up, there was an emerging national parents movement that was partially catalyzed by shocking video on the 60 Minutes news program featuring the children of Brother Love's congregation as young as 7 years old, puffing away on huge marijuana joints. Add to that the popular acceptance in high times and other cultural touchstones of cocaine as just another party drug alongside marijuana. You can find cocaine centerfolds and cocaine covers in the late 70s and early 80s editions of High Times magazine. And so as the 80s wore on, and we had the high-profile cocaine incidents of Richard Pryor, John Belushi's death, and Len Bias's death, cocaine being tied in with marijuana, being tied in with the whole 1970s party culture, was now an albatross around the legalization movement's neck. We were associated with cocaine that was tearing up the cities, and marijuana was just another drug. And then throughout the 80s, of course, we had NORML in disarray, not succeeding in any marijuana reforms. Some staffers from NORML broke away and formed Marijuana Policy Project. The Bay Area sees the medical marijuana movement beginning in the early 90s, and that's where the direction of marijuana reforms went, to supporting just the medical use of marijuana, leaving 90% of cannabis consumers off to the side, stay out of the way while we get some legalization. And that's something we supported because we believed that that's what would open the door, that that's what would be the crack in the wall of ignorance. But we were betrayed throughout the 2000s and the 2010s as legalization makes the ballot in California, Washington, and now Ohio, and we find people opposing the ending of my criminality and your criminality because they like the status quo. They like the setup they already got. I got's mine is the name of the syndrome. So if medical and spiritual wish to coexist with the rest of us, it's time for all of us to recognize that why someone uses marijuana is irrelevant to determining their rights. No user of cannabis deserves a cage, period. That's all the time we got for our podcast hour, but for you live listeners, stay tuned. Hour 2 is next. Toker Talk Radio. For everyone here at Roller J Studios in beautiful legal Portland, Oregon, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you